This is Our House presented by Samsung, and it sounds like Canadian Jonathan David is trying to figure out where home is because over the weekend, while he penned a very heartfelt thank you to the nation for all their support during the World Cup, rumors were abound as well. Nicolo Schida of Italy saying that Jonathan David turned down a very rich bid from a Turkish club. Didn't say which side offered that bid, but that Jonathan David declined it. But I guess the big question here is, Ollie, we know even heading into this World Cup, things weren't the greatest with Juventus. We were wondering about playing time. Now they're bringing in players. Juventus is signing strikers. So if you're Jonathan David, do you think you have to move on from Juve? Do you have to find a new home?
Yeah, I think so. And I would expect so. I just don't know that there seems to be a great commitment on the part of the club to continuing with Jonathan David as a core part of that team. And I think if that's the case, then Jonathan David is going to have to think about going somewhere where he gets that kind of consideration, because he is still a very good player who I think could merit that at a lot of good clubs around Europe. So like I'm glad if that rumor is true that he's decided not to go to Turkey. I think a better league will be available for him than that. I think before he went to Juventus, there was talks about Saudi, so he's shown to his credit that he's willing to turn down money in order to get, you know, a better competitive place to play in terms of his future and his career. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back to Ligue 1. I think he was very comfortable there. I think a lot of the Canadian players, obviously French speaking from Quebec and Ottawa, are going to be very comfortable there. It's been a good spot for a few of them. I think that's a league, obviously, that he's proven he can score goals in. And it's a good league. You know, there's a lot of good players at this tournament, even if you're not playing for Paris Saint-Germain, playing for good clubs in that league who are ready to deliver for their national teams at big tournaments. So that would be the focus for me, would be the top 5 league, staying at that kind of level. I don't think it necessarily needs to be an elite club. Like I said, you see a lot of players playing for kind of European chasing clubs, upper mid-table clubs. It's a good level for them to springboard, at least from our perspective as national team, you know, watching the national team and wanting the best for him in a Canada jersey.
The story's one to watch, and I think it's altogether problematic because it's just been 1 year at Juventus. Generally, I would say okay. It takes good players, oftentimes really good players, other ones. Takes some time to settle, especially when a coaching change comes in between. And it was a really poor season overall for Juventus. No Champions League football, which will affect their finances and probably open up a window of opportunity to potentially play a little bit more, depending on who they may be able to recruit and replace Vlahovic and whatever else they do in this window. Unfortunately, it seems like Juventus supporters, the Juve papers, the media have just given up on Jonathan David. They want him to see him leave. And that, as a Canadian and someone that understands how good this player is, it's disheartening, to be honest with you. I don't think it's just us. I think that the entire country wanted to see him succeed, taking that really big step in his career and stepping up in level. But for whatever reason, it didn't come off for him, especially in the stretch run of the season. And it looks like it might not be his decision. He may be pushed out. Now, of course, David needs to be able to agree to any move that's going to take place. Problem is, he's been handsomely rewarded for his talents with a brand new contract that's long-term, paying him significant money. You can say Liga, Ollie. I'm just curious, like, what club may be able to afford his salary and what those commitments actually look like in League One right now. Marseille, they're a big club. Potentially Monaco. I don't think he's of the quality of PSG or anything like that. I think that that's why he's generally being linked to clubs in Turkey, because a lot of these clubs are rich. They're willing to spend above and beyond to bring really good talent to it. We're seeing good talent in Turkey, and they wouldn't dismiss it as a destination. Like Leandro Trossard has just moved there. One of our favorites, Atiba Hutchinson, went there for years and is absolutely beloved by Besiktas supporters, living in a great city in Istanbul as well. And people hold Atiba in the highest acclaim. And I guarantee if David went there, they'd very much fall in love with Jonathan David as well. Kyle Larin had a really good spell, playing some excellent football for Besiktas as well in Turkey. So I'm not going to be a snob and rule out any country at this point. I just think that what he makes, Andy, is going to limit the opportunity that's potentially presented to him. And that's why the situation is potentially problematic.
I get this is the world of sport, but I feel like we were just sitting here talking about Gazzetta dello Sport and the fact that they had a Canadian on the front cover of that Italian page for like the first time ever. And he was wearing the Canadian kit, by the way. They didn't have like, impose the Juventus kit. And now here we are talking about Juve possibly not wanting him. And I know maybe down the road there's another conversation to be had there about Canadians when they do try to find these bigger clubs. Is that just part and parcel of how sport works? Or is there a little bit of concern that maybe some with the bigger clubs, you just can't get that type of playing time? Richie Laryea, we know that story with him and obviously ultimately returning back to Major League Soccer. But maybe let's look at some other players here on this Canadian national team. And if you think that they need to find a new home, like who would that be? And ideally, where do you think they could go that would really, hone their skills and still make them valuable choices here for Jesse Marsh as well, right?
Me?
Sorry,
Ollie,
Ollie, yes.
you want to take that? Yeah, go ahead, Ollie.
Well, just
I'm looking
quickly
at
to
you,
finish-
Ollie, but then I realize we're on Zoom and you probably can't tell that I'm making eye
I
contact
can
with
tell,
you.
sorry.
Stream-
Just
oh,
quickly
Zoom.
on David before we move on to the other players. One of the rumors out there is Paris FC, not Paris Saint-Germain, and that one is an interesting one to me. It's a club that finished 11th, I believe, in Ligue 1 last season, but they're very ambitious. They got a lot of money behind them, so that could potentially solve the wage issue as well. And I think that would be one that might appeal. In terms of other players, I think there's going to be a lot here. Stefan Eustáquio is one of the ones near the top of the list. Obviously, he's had his loan at LAFC and MLS. I think that was good for him to prepare him for the World Cup. He played very well at the World Cup. He talked about being in a really good place physically, which maybe MLS had allowed him to do. It's, allowed him to make sure that he wasn't playing when he shouldn't have been playing because of fitness reasons or whatever, as opposed to feeling like you're constantly under that pressure at Porto of needing to play, needing to prove yourself, needing to keep your place in the team. So I think that worked out for him, but I still think this is a player at 29 years old who should still be looking ahead to the next World Cup with Canada, still be looking ahead for the next few years of his career, thinking that he's still in his prime. And I'd rather see him stay in Europe in that regards. And I think he is absolutely good enough. So he's someone who's done himself no harm whatsoever with the way that he's played at the World Cup, having a standout moment, obviously, as well in the South Africa game, which will have brought attention on him. And I'd be interested to see where he goes next, whether he tries it again at Porto or goes somewhere else. But I think he'll want to give it one more go in Europe before he decides to come back to North America, if he does later in his career.
Yeah, interesting. Whether it's Eustáquio or other players, I think the conversation shifts to the one that we were having heading into this World Cup, Andy, whereas like what players need moves in order to increase their standing within the men's national team program, or what will set them up best to play in a World Cup. Now there's a gap. Now there's time. So I think that when it comes to the Canadian perspective or the Canada perspective, playing for the national team, you got to take the long view in some of these moves. But if you're players, I'm more looking at players that are looking to capitalize on good World Cups to see maybe if there's another step that they can take in their career. Alistair Johnston's the one that comes immediately to mind for me. Life's good in Glasgow. He's very good player for Celtic. Missed the vast majority of last season out through injury. But I wonder if someone comes calling that's willing to give him a longer contract on more money in a more substantial league, whether he be a player that would welcome that kind of move right now. Promise David, does his injury issues maybe pour some cold water on the time being for a potential move to another club out of Belgium? He's a player that is very curious to me, and maybe other players that might not necessarily fit just in terms of where they are in the pecking order. What about Liam Miller? That's an interesting one to me, because we all think that, hey, when a club is promoted to the Premier League, that's a great move for the player. Is Liam Miller going to get requisite time? Is he of a Premier League level right now? Or is he a player that could potentially go it alone as he continues to grow as a player as well? Those are just three players that I think are really interesting for different reasons. Of course, we know that Derek Cornelius is going to find a new club this summer. There's others that are very much the same, but those are three players. Like, do you take a step forward? Do you take a step back? There are interesting times ahead for all three of those players for me.
Yeah, Derek Cornelius is also just an interesting one in the sense that Ollie, I mean, he and Moise Bombito were this exceptional pairing. And then, of course, Moise Bombito getting injured, not fully fit here at this World Cup. Luke DeFugero really making a name for himself when he did come on in. But where do you see Derek Cornelius, or where would you like to just maybe see him land, or what he needs to do to continue to hold on? I know the striker is the sexy conversation to have, but the center backs are very important as well.
Yeah, I think there was quite a few players leading into the World Cup who obviously the World Cup was always going to be a huge moment in their careers, and they tried to kind of engineer moves, or sometimes they were needed to engineer moves to set themselves up for this tournament, right? So some of them, like an Ali Ahmed, for example, made a move that's a bit more kind of, this is a long-term move for my career. This is the next step for the next 2 or 3 years. And that makes sense in the longer term. But there was a lot of players, I think, who were just trying to get it right for 6 months or for a year to make sure that they had a season that led into the World Cup that suited them. Obviously, Cornelius, for maybe reasons that he couldn't have foreseen, that didn't work out the best for him, both in terms of firstly getting injured, and then obviously the situation at Rangers was a disaster. So that, you sometimes have to take a bit of a risk in trying to get it right, and that didn't go right for him. I still think there's an excellent player there. I think there's a player who's had a real rise with the national team over the last few years. There's someone who's going to know that Luke DeFugero has been very impressive and has a big future, and will want to kind of reestablish himself as that partner for Moise Bombito. So again, I put him in a similar bracket probably to Eustáquio. I think there might be maybe more options and higher level options for Eustáquio, but Cornelius is someone who I think can play in a good league in Europe, and that's what he'll want to do now. It's just about maybe now having that runway, not having a tournament looming, where you can really start to take the decision as to what's best for my club career without necessarily thinking so much about the short-term implications for the national team.
Yeah, two other players just came to mind. Nico Sigor, I think that he's potentially ready for a new move, to take a step up with a new challenge. We know there's a player there. It's also intriguing what position might be would come along with any potential move. And I said this on a previous show. I think it's time to look to the future when it comes to the goalkeeping. And Owen Goodman, I think, needs a little bit of stability, change clubs in the middle of the season. I'd love to see him get a run of games with Canada in these upcoming games to see what he's all about. I know that generally that these transitions take time, but let's see where he might end up, and if it can bring a little bit more stability. Certainly a goalkeeper with lots of promise. Just don't think that'll remain with Crystal Palace again. So another loan looks like is the most likely resolution, at least in the short term, for him.
I like how you had your hand there, literally names coming to mind,
thinking.
channeling them out and talking about them. All right. We have a very busy next few days here with the Canadian Premier League on One Soccer, but it is worth noting Forge FC, they will be hosting Pacific, but they have put out a statement saying they are monitoring the air quality. As we know, here in Ontario, the air quality is not the greatest because of the Northern Ontario wildfires, which, by the way, our hearts go out, our thoughts go out to everyone there. Hopefully you can stay safe. These are obviously very scary times, but Forge said they will monitor the air quality and let us know if that game will be a go. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, CPL action here on One Soccer.